The night air was sharp, laced with the bite of winter, but the little kitten didn't move. Curled up just outside the hospital doors, his frail body shivered against the cold. His matted fur barely provided warmth, yet he remained, eyes fixed on the entrance as if waiting for someone who had promised to return. Dr. Robert Walker had passed the cat countless times before, barely noticing. Work consumed him, long shifts, endless patience, and no time for distractions. But tonight, something made him stop. Maybe it was the way the kitten's ears perked slightly at every figure that walked through the doors, only to droop in disappointment. Or maybe it was the look in his eyes, deep, longing, filled with a sorrow that didn't belong in something so small. Frowning, Robert turned to a nurse heading out beside him. "That cat, he's always here, isn't he?" She sighed, tightening her coat against the wind. "Every night for weeks now. Poor thing just sits there waiting, waiting." The word settled uneasily in Robert's chest. This wasn't just a stray seeking shelter. It was something more, something deeper. And as the doctor stared at the lonely creature, he had no idea that unraveling the truth would change him forever. Dr. Robert Walker stepped out of the hospital, exhaustion pressing down on his shoulders. His mind buzzed with unfinished reports and the relentless schedule waiting for him the next day. But as he tightened his coat against the cold, his gaze landed on a familiar sight. The small kitten, still there, curled up in the same spot as the night before. Snow had begun to fall, delicate flakes clinging to the kitten's unkempt fur. He barely seemed to notice, his eyes locked on the entrance, as if waiting for someone only he could see. Robert hesitated. He wasn't the kind of man who stopped for stray animals. He barely had time for people outside of his patients, and yet, something about the little cat held him there. A silent, unspoken plea in those tired, unwavering eyes. With a sigh, Robert took a step closer, crouching a few feet away. "Still here, huh?" he murmured, his breath forming misty clouds in the freezing air. The kitten lifted his head slightly, ears flicking at the sound of his voice, but he didn't move closer. He only stared, those deep, searching eyes locking onto Robert's with an emotion the doctor couldn't quite place. A lump formed in his throat. He swallowed it down. "Are you waiting for someone?" His voice was quieter now, almost afraid of the answer he wouldn't receive. A scraping sound interrupted his thoughts. The hospital janitor shuffled past, broom in hand, shaking his head with a smirk. "You talking to that mutt again, Doc?" He chuckled. "Been sitting there for weeks now. Some say he's waiting for someone, maybe a patient." Robert stiffened, glancing back at the hospital. The thought unsettled him. Patients came and went. Some walked out, some never did. His eyes returned to the kitten, watching the snow gather around him, his small frame shivering against the cold. Waiting. For who? And why did it make Robert's chest ache in a way he didn't understand? By the end of the week, the little kitten was no longer just a passing thought in Dr. Robert Walker's mind. He had become a silent presence in his routine, a shadow of sorrow waiting at the hospital doors. Each night, Robert would step outside, expecting, no, needing, to see those tired, unwavering eyes looking back at him. And each night the kitten was there, curled up against the cold, waiting for someone who might never return. Robert wasn't sure when concern turned into something more. Maybe it was the way the kitten barely touched the food he left, as if eating was secondary to his vigil, or maybe it was the way his frail body trembled against the cold, yet he never once strayed from his spot. One night, as the bitter wind howled through the streets, Robert found himself crouching beside the little cat again. "You know, you remind me of someone," he murmured, his voice softer than he expected. The kitten's ears flicked at the sound of his voice but didn't turn away from the hospital doors. Robert exhaled, shaking his head. "You're waiting for them, aren't you?" The kitten blinked, his breath fogging in the icy air. He didn't need to answer. Robert already knew. The weight in his chest grew heavier. How many times had he seen that look before? In the eyes of children waiting for parents who never came, in the faces of loved ones staring at closed doors, holding on to hope long after it had faded. That night, sleep eluded him. The image of the kitten, small and shivering yet stubborn in his loyalty, gnawed at his conscience. By morning, Robert had made up his mind. "Still no reports of a missing cat?" he asked the receptionist as he sipped his coffee, though he already knew the answer. She shook her head. "No one's come looking for him." A lump formed in Robert's throat. His fingers tightened around the cup. No one. Cat had been waiting for someone who was never coming back. And suddenly, Robert knew he couldn't let him wait alone any longer. Each morning, Robert took quiet satisfaction in seeing the empty food and water bowls. The kitten was eating, surviving, but that was all. No matter how many meals Robert left or how many soft words he offered, the little cat remained distant, his heart tethered not to kindness but to the hospital's doors. One evening, as Robert sat in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, he caught sight of the kitten again, curled up in his usual spot, unmoving, unwavering. A deep sigh escaped him. "Why won't you leave?" he muttered, though the question wasn't meant for the cat. It was the helplessness gnawing at his chest that demanded an answer. He was a doctor. He fixed things, saved people. But this tiny creature lost in longing, was something he couldn't heal. Then, on a bitterly cold Saturday evening, something changed. As Robert approached the hospital doors, he noticed a small group of nurses gathered near the kitten. Their voices were hushed, filled with a mix of surprise and warmth. Emma, one of the kinder nurses, knelt beside the cat, her gloved hand gently stroking his head. "He finally let someone touch him," she murmured, glancing up as Robert stepped closer. For the first time, the kitten wasn't just enduring, he was accepting. Robert's chest tightened. He had spent weeks trying to reach this little creature, yet here he was, leaning into the warmth of a stranger's hand. A strange pang of something unrecognizable twisted inside him. Was it relief, or was it something deeper? Something that felt an awful lot like regret. Because no matter how much effort he had put into helping this cat, the truth was painfully clear. The kitten hadn't been waiting for kindness. He had been waiting for someone else, and Robert was terrified to find out who. Emma smiled as Robert approached. "It's like he's starting to trust us," she said softly, continuing to stroke the kitten's head. Robert knelt beside her, his hand hovering just above the kitten's fur. He hesitated. He had spent weeks watching from a distance, leaving food and water, speaking in gentle tones, but he had never tried to touch him. "Is that true, buddy?" Robert murmured, his voice quieter than usual. "Are you finally warming up to us?" Slowly he reached out, his fingers barely brushing against the kitten's matted coat. The little cat flinched but didn't move away. Instead, he lifted his head, his eyes meeting Robert's, deep pools of hope and sorrow, filled with something unspoken. A lump formed in Robert's throat. This wasn't just a stray looking for food. This was a soul weighed down by loss. Out the truth. The next morning, Robert arrived at the hospital earlier than usual, his mind clouded with restless thoughts from the night before. He had spent hours lying awake, replaying the moment the kitten had looked at him, not just with trust, but with need. "Who are you waiting for?" The thought refused to leave him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than just loyalty. Stopping by the reception desk, he tried again. "Any updates on a missing cat?" His voice carried a hint of something unfamiliar. Hope. The receptionist barely glanced up as she tapped at her keyboard. "Sorry, Dr. Walker. No reports, no inquiries." She frowned, finally looking up. "It's like he just appeared one day and decided this was home." Robert exhaled, running a hand through his hair. His gaze drifted toward the entrance where he knew the little cat was waiting, like always. Only now, Robert wasn't sure if the kitten was waiting for someone else, or if somehow he had been waiting for him all along. Robert stood near the hospital entrance, his eyes instinctively searching for the small, familiar figure curled up against the cold. He exhaled slowly. The idea of leaving this mystery unsolved gnawed at him like an open wound. He couldn't just walk away, not anymore. After his morning rounds, he found Emma at the nurse's station, her kind eyes flicking up as he approached. "Emma," he began, his voice more determined than he expected. "I think we need to do more. That cat, he's not here by accident." She tilted her head, studying him. "You really care about him, don't you?" Robert hesitated. The question caught him off guard. Care? That wasn't the right word, was it? He was a doctor, trained to solve problems, to heal. But this was something else. Still, he nodded. "It's hard to explain. It just feels like we're missing something important." A slow smile spread across Emma's face. "Well," she said, "I have a friend at the animal shelter. Maybe they can help us check if he's chipped." Robert exhaled, relief washing over him. That's a start. That evening, Emma returned with a leash. The real test would be whether the kitten would allow it. She crouched down, speaking in a soft, soothing tone as she reached for him. The little cat tensed for a moment, his body rigid, but then, to everyone's surprise, he let her slip the leash over his head. He didn't resist. He didn't run. He simply looked up at Robert. The trust in that gaze hit him harder than he expected. The kitten's small frame trembled as they guided him toward the car. Robert felt a pang of guilt. He didn't want to scare him, but this was necessary. They had to find out where he belonged. At the shelter, the staff wasted no time scanning him for a microchip. Robert held his breath, waiting for an answer, hoping for a breakthrough. A faint beep sounded, but the technician frowned. No registration, no records. He shook his head. It's like he doesn't exist. Robert clenched his jaw. No past, no home, nothing. Emma sighed, running a hand over the kitten's fur. What now? We could post his picture online, she suggested. See if anyone recognizes him. The shelter staff agreed, snapping a photo and uploading it to local community boards and social media. If he has an owner, they'll see this, the technician assured them. But as Robert looked down at the little cat who sat quietly by his feet, a strange thought crept into his mind. And if he doesn't? If no one came for him, what then? Robert nodded, but deep down, doubt gnawed at him. If this cat had an owner, why had no one come looking for him? Why had he been waiting outside the hospital, night after night, through the bitter cold? Days passed, but no answers came. The online posts yielded nothing. No claims, no lost pet reports, no distant voice reaching out for the cat. And yet, as the mystery lingered, something else began to change. Robert found himself drawn to the little cat more than he expected. Though he hadn't taken him home, he lingered outside the hospital longer each evening, sitting beside him on the cold steps, watching the world pass by. The cat didn't demand anything. No barks, no whimpers, just quiet companionship.
In a way, Robert needed it. After the constant noise of the pediatric ward, the endless beeping monitors, and the weight of saving lives, the kitten's silent presence was a strange kind of comfort. A reminder that some things in life weren't about fixing or moving on. Some things just were. One evening, as the last of the visitors trickled out of the hospital, Robert exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. He glanced down at the cat, who sat patiently beside him, ears perked as if waiting for him to speak. "You know," Robert murmured, his voice quiet in the chilly air, "I never really thought much about loyalty until I met you." The cat tilted his head, listening. "My job, it's all about routine. Fixing things. Moving on." He shook his head, staring out at the darkening sky. "But you're different. You're staying. No matter what." The kitten blinked, his brown eyes filled with something Robert couldn't quite name. Robert chuckled, the sound low and tired. "You're a better listener than most of my colleagues, you know that." But as the humor faded, something heavier settled in his chest. He swallowed, then whispered, almost afraid of the question itself. "Who are you waiting for?" The cat didn't answer, but his gaze never wavered from the hospital doors. And that's when Robert knew, whatever the truth was, it wasn't just about a lost pet. The next day, that suspicion only deepened. As Robert made his way through the hospital hallways, he caught the faint murmur of conversation between two nurses near the break room. "Such a tragic case," one of them was saying, shaking her head. "He never got to say goodbye." Robert slowed his pace, his stomach tightening. "Yeah," the other nurse sighed. "And you know what's even stranger? His cat went missing the same night." A chill ran down Robert's spine. He didn't know why, but somehow, he already knew the next words would change everything. "That cat," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "He reminds me of a story I once heard, about a cat that waited for his owner outside a train station. For years. Even after the man had passed." Robert stiffened. A shiver ran down his spine. Could that be the case here? Had this little cat's owner died? The thought unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. He had seen grief countless times, families mourning, children left without parents. But this was different. This was loyalty in its purest, most heartbreaking form. Determined to uncover the truth, Robert found Emma during her shift. "I need your help," he said, voice firm but low. Emma paused, glancing up from her clipboard. "With what?" He hesitated before speaking. "Patient records. I know it's a long shot, but what if the cat's owner was admitted here and never made it out?" Emma's brows knitted together. "Robert, she exhaled, choosing her words carefully. "That's a sensitive area. We can't just." She stopped, studied him. The look in his eyes said everything. This wasn't just about a stray cat anymore. With a quiet sigh, she nodded. "Okay, let's see what we can find." For hours, they combed through patient records from the past month, searching for any name, any detail that might explain the cat's presence. Just as Robert began to lose hope, Emma let out a sharp gasp. "Robert, look at this." She turned the screen toward him, her finger trembling slightly as she pointed to a name. Leo Langley. Robert leaned in, scanning the details. Langley had been admitted 3 weeks ago after a severe heart attack. Despite the doctor's best efforts, he hadn't survived. He lived alone, Emma murmured, reading further. No next of kin. No emergency contacts. Robert felt a strange heaviness settle in his chest. Could this be it? Was Leo Langley the man the cat had been waiting for? It's possible, Emma admitted, her voice quieter now. Robert swallowed hard. But, how would the cat have known to come here? Emma didn't answer. Because the truth was, some things defied logic. Some bonds couldn't be broken. Not even by death. We need to look into this more. That evening, Robert found himself once again sitting on the cold hospital steps, the cat curled up beside him like always. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, he had a name. Leo Langley. He spoke it softly, testing the weight of it in the night air. The cat's ears twitched. Robert's breath caught in his throat. Was that it? Was he your person? The kitten didn't move, didn't bark, but something in his deep brown eyes shifted. A flicker of recognition. A quiet sadness. And Robert knew. He swallowed against the lump in his throat. If that's true, then I'm sorry, he murmured. I'm sorry you lost him. For the first time, he reached out, not out of curiosity, but out of something deeper. Something more human. His fingers brushed against the cat's fur, hesitant at first, but when the kitten didn't pull away, Robert let his hand settle. His touch was gentle, careful, and then, the cat leaned into him. Something warm and unexpected spread through Robert's chest. You're not alone anymore, he whispered. I'll make sure of that. But the name Leo Langley wouldn't leave his mind. If this little cat had belonged to him, there had to be more to the story. More than just a lonely pet searching for a lost owner. The next morning, driven by an unfamiliar mix of curiosity and something that felt dangerously close to hope, Robert made a decision. He was going to Leo Langley's house. The address had been listed in the hospital records, a modest single-story home on the outskirts of town. As Robert pulled up in front of it, he took in the sight of the small, weathered house. The front yard was unkempt, patches of grass overgrown, a wooden porch swing hanging slightly crooked. The kind of place that had once been loved but had slowly faded into quiet solitude. Robert stepped out of his car, the cat trotting beside him. He hesitated before knocking on the door, half expecting no answer. Silence. Then, just as he turned to leave, a voice, rough, cautious, called out from behind him. You looking for someone? Robert spun around. An elderly neighbor stood at the edge of the property, a rake in one hand, suspicion in his eyes. Robert cleared his throat. I'm Dr. Walker. He glanced down at the cat, who stood close to his side. I wanted to learn more about Leo Langley. The man's expression shifted. The suspicion melted into something softer. Ah, the old man said, nodding knowingly. His gaze drifted to the cat. So, he's still waiting, huh? Robert's heart clenched. You knew Leo? Knew him well, the man admitted, leaning on his rake. He didn't have much. Lived alone for years. But he had him. He gestured toward the cat. That kitten was his whole world. Robert felt his throat tighten. And what happened? The old man sighed, his gaze dropping for a moment. Leo wasn't doing great. Heart was weak. He collapsed one night, right here in this house. Paramedics took him, but the cat wouldn't leave. He chased the ambulance halfway down the street before he lost it. Robert swallowed hard. And then? The man shrugged, his voice quiet. After that, he disappeared. Guess we know where he ended up now. Robert looked down at the cat, who sat patiently beside him, staring at the house as if he, too, was remembering. 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, this little soul had been waiting, searching, holding on to hope that Leo Langley would walk out of those hospital doors and take him home. But Leo Langley was never coming home. Robert exhaled shakily, the weight of it settling deep in his bones. The cat wasn't just lost. He was grieving. And maybe, in a way Robert didn't fully understand yet, so was he. I don't know yet, Robert admitted, running a hand through his hair. But I do know one thing, he can't keep waiting for someone who's never coming back. Emma sighed, glancing toward the window. Poor thing, she murmured. He must be so confused. Lost. Robert nodded, a strange heaviness settling in his chest. This wasn't just a stray looking for food or shelter. This was something deeper. Something raw. Grief. Pure, unwavering grief. The cat wasn't just waiting. He was holding on. That night, Robert stepped outside the hospital as the cold wind bit at his skin. As always, the little brown cat lay curled up in his usual spot, eyes locked on the entrance as if willing Leo to walk through those doors. Robert crouched beside him. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. The cat blinked but didn't move. Robert hesitated. "Leo isn't coming back," he continued, his voice lower now, gentler. "I know you don't understand that, but, he's gone." The cat let out a quiet sigh, barely audible over the distant hum of the city. Robert swallowed hard. Maybe, just maybe, the cat wasn't the only one struggling to let go. He exhaled, staring at the hospital doors just as the kitten did. "You're not the only one who's spent too much time in this place," he admitted, almost to himself. "I see people come and go every day. Some get better, some don't. And then I move on to the next patient." He glanced down at the cat, his fingers curling against the cold concrete. "But you're still here. You don't move on. You just keep waiting." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, cautiously, Robert reached out. His fingers brushed against the cat's fur, warm despite the cold. This time, the kitten didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in. And just like that, Robert knew. The waiting had to end. For both of them. For the first time in years, Robert's house didn't feel quite so empty. The little cat, who still had no name, had begun to settle in. He was hesitant at first, carefully sniffing each corner of the unfamiliar space, his small paws patting softly against the wooden floors. But he didn't run. He didn't try to leave. Instead, he stayed. Each night, he curled up near Robert's couch, his eyes following the doctor's every move as if still trying to make sense of this new chapter in his life. And each morning, when Robert woke up, he found the kitten sitting near the door, his tail wagging ever so slightly at the sight of him. "You really don't like being alone, do you?" Robert murmured one evening as he absent-mindedly scratched behind the cat's ears. The kitten let out a small sigh, leaning into his touch. Robert exhaled, staring into those deep, knowing eyes. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but somehow, this quiet little creature had carved his way into his life, into his heart. But even as the cat began to adjust to his new home, Robert could see it. The waiting. Some nights, the kitten would sit by the window, gazing out into the dark, ears twitching at every distant sound. Other times, Robert caught him staring at the front door, as if still expecting Leo to walk through it. Loyalty like that didn't just disappear overnight. Robert sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know you miss him," he whispered. "I know this isn't where you thought you'd be." The cat blinked up at him, his small body still. "But you're not alone anymore," Robert added, his voice quieter now. "And neither am I." As if understanding, the kitten slowly walked over and rested his head against Robert's leg. For the first time since Leo Langley had passed, the little cat wasn't waiting outside the hospital. And for the first time in a long time, Robert Walker didn't feel like he was simply moving from one patient to the next. They were both healing, in their own way, together. The peace didn't last. One evening, as Robert finished his dinner, he noticed the cat sitting by the door, his tail wagging anxiously. "What is it, buddy?" Robert asked, setting down his fork. The kitten whined, pawing at the door with quiet urgency. Robert frowned. It wasn't like him to be restless. Usually, he curled up near the couch or by Robert's feet. But tonight, something was different. Curious, Robert walked over and opened the door, expecting the cat to simply step into the yard. But instead, the little creature turned back to look at him, eyes pleading, then took off down the street. "Hey, where are you going?" The cat stopped a few feet ahead, looking back over his shoulder. Waiting. Robert hesitated only for a moment before grabbing his coat and stepping outside. The air was crisp, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. With a determined bark, the cat took off again, weaving through alleys, cutting across empty intersections. Robert followed, his breath coming out in clouds as his heart pounded, not just from the pace but from the creeping sense that this was leading somewhere important. After several minutes, they reached a small park on the outskirts of town. The swings creaked slightly in the wind, and the distant glow of streetlights barely touched the worn pathways. Robert slowed his steps. "What are we doing here?" he murmured. The cat stopped near an old wooden bench, his body tense, ears perked. Then, he let out a soft, almost mournful bark. Robert followed his gaze, and that's when he saw it. A figure sat on the bench, hunched over, barely visible in the dim light. An old coat was wrapped tightly around their frail frame, their hands clasped together as if trying to hold in the cold. A homeless man. Robert's pulse quickened. He hadn't expected this. The cat whined and took a hesitant step forward. Robert swallowed hard, his doctor's instincts kicking in. He stepped closer, carefully observing the man. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale beneath the coat. Something was wrong, sir, Robert said gently, kneeling down beside him. Are you okay? The man stirred slightly but didn't respond. His eyes fluttered open, dazed, unfocused. Hypothermia, dehydration, possibly worse. Robert exhaled sharply, pulling out his phone. I'm calling for help. Just hold on. As he dialed, he felt a small nudge against his arm. The cat had moved beside him, his warm little body pressed close, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. Robert looked at him in realization. You brought me here, he whispered. The cat let out a soft huff, curling up beside the man as if to keep him warm. And in that moment, Robert knew, this wasn't just loyalty. This was something deeper. Back at home, Robert carefully placed the letter on his kitchen counter, staring at the elegant, shaky handwriting that carried so much love, so much loss. The weight of it pressed against his chest, heavier than anything he had expected when he first noticed the small, shivering cat outside the hospital. He let out a slow breath and moved to the stove, setting a kettle to boil tea. He needed something warm to settle the emotions stirring inside him. At his feet, the cat sat patiently, his tail thumping softly against the floor. You really loved him, didn't you? Robert murmured, crouching down to run his fingers through the kitten's fur. The little cat leaned into his touch, his body warm against Robert's palm. He was silent, but his eyes, God, those eyes, held a depth of understanding that sent another wave of emotion crashing over Robert. The kettle whistled, breaking the moment. Robert stood, poured himself a cup, and sat at the small kitchen table. The letter lay open before him, its words echoing in his mind. You were my greatest joy, my most loyal friend. I only wish I could have stayed longer, to walk beside you just a little while more. Robert swallowed hard, blinking back the sting in his eyes. He had spent years treating patients, watching life slip through his fingers despite his best efforts. But this was different. This wasn't a chart, a case, a file to close. This was a love story, one that had been left unfinished. He looked down at the cat. No, not just a cat. Leo's family. His last connection to a world that had already moved on. The kitten gazed up at him, then yawned, stretching before curling up beside Robert's chair. A small smile tugged at the doctor's lips. You know, he said softly, taking another sip of tea, I think Leo would have liked the idea of us looking out for each other. The cat let out a quiet sigh, his body finally relaxing, as if he had been holding on to something, waiting for something. And maybe, just maybe, he had finally found it. Robert's breath hitched as he watched James paw at the counter, his eyes filled with quiet longing. The small cat let out a soft whine, then sat down, staring up at Robert as if waiting for an answer. You miss him, Robert murmured, running a hand over his tired face. The truth of it settled like a weight in the room, thick and unspoken. James's tail gave a single, slow wag, hopeful yet hesitant. Robert reached for the letter, carefully unfolding its worn edges. His fingers traced the delicate script, Leo's words still echoing in his mind. If I could have stayed longer, I would have. But no matter where I go, my love for you remains. Always. He exhaled slowly and set the letter down, his eyes meeting James's. I know it's not the same, he admitted softly, but you're not alone, James. And neither am I. The cat blinked, then with a quiet huff, he hopped up onto Robert's lap, something he had never done before. For a moment, Robert was too stunned to react. Then, hesitantly, he wrapped his arms around the small, trembling body. James pressed closer, burying his face against Robert's chest. It was as if something inside him had finally given way, the weight of his waiting, his grief, pouring into this one fragile moment. Robert swallowed the lump in his throat, smoothing a hand down James's back. You don't have to keep waiting, he whispered. He loved you, James. And I think he'd want you to be happy. The little cat let out a deep, shuddering sigh, the kind that spoke of exhaustion, of surrender, of acceptance. For the first time since that snowy night outside the hospital, James finally closed his eyes and slept peacefully in someone's arms. And for the first time in a long time, Robert felt something settle in his chest, something warm, something whole. Maybe, just maybe, they had both found exactly what they needed. As the memorial continued, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the park. James sat still, his ears twitching as familiar voices spoke of the man he had loved. Robert could feel the weight of it all, the sorrow, the gratitude, the quiet recognition of a life well lived but not well known. An elderly man stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he held out an old, worn photograph. "Leo used to sit on that very bench," he said, nodding toward a spot beneath a sprawling oak tree. "Every morning, rain or shine, always with his little cat beside him." He chuckled softly. He called him his shadow. Robert looked down at James, who sat alert, his eyes fixed on the bench as if remembering, as if he, too, could hear Leo's voice in the wind. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and for a brief moment, it felt as though Leo was there, watching over them. After the last story was shared, Robert stepped forward, his throat tight. "Leo may be gone," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion swelling in his chest, "but his love for James, for this community, and for the simple joys in life, that hasn't disappeared." He glanced down at James. He left behind a friend who's been waiting for him, and though James may never fully understand, I want him to know that he's not alone. James let out a quiet whine, then did something unexpected. He walked over to the base of the oak tree and lay down, resting his head on the roots. A hush fell over the crowd. It was as if, in that moment, James had finally found a place where Leo's memory still lingered. A place where he could say goodbye. Robert swallowed hard and knelt beside him. "We'll come here often," he promised. "You don't have to wait anymore, James. You're home now." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The neighbor who had helped organize the memorial dabbed at her eyes. Leo would have loved this. As the gathering dispersed, people left flowers by the tree, small tokens of remembrance. Robert lingered, watching as James stretched out in the grass, his body relaxed in a way Robert had never seen before. For the first time in weeks, James didn't stare at the road, waiting. Instead, he closed his eyes, letting the evening breeze carry him into peaceful rest. And for the first time in a long time, Robert felt at peace, too. Leo's kindness, his unwavering devotion, and the quiet strength he carried through life, Robert continued, his gaze drifting down to James, who sat calmly at his feet. James isn't just a cat. He's a reminder that love doesn't end when someone is gone. It lingers in the spaces they left behind, in the habits they formed, in the hearts they touched.
A hush fell over the small crowd, the weight of his words settling among them like autumn leaves. Robert took a breath, steadying himself. Leo didn't have family, at least not in the way we traditionally think. But he had James. And now, James has me. And I promise, just as Leo did, that I'll take care of him. James let out a quiet whine, then did something unexpected. He nudged Robert's leg, as if offering his own reassurance. A few people smiled through their tears. The neighbor who had first spoken with Robert wiped her eyes. "Leo would have been so grateful to hear that," she said softly. As the service wrapped up, people placed flowers and small tokens beneath the oak tree, the same place where Leo had sat with James so many mornings before. Robert lingered as the crowd dispersed, watching James sniff at the flowers, his tail wagging faintly, not in sadness, but in quiet acceptance. Robert knelt beside him. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured, running a hand over James's back. "You don't have to wait anymore. He'd want you to be happy." James turned, licking Robert's hand once before settling beside him. The last light of the evening filtered through the trees, casting a golden glow over them both. For the first time since meeting James, Robert felt something shift, not just in the little cat, but in himself. The weight of the past still lingered, but it no longer felt like a burden. Instead, it felt like a gift. And as they left the park together, Robert knew one thing for sure. Leo's love hadn't disappeared. It had simply found a new place to call home. In both of them are those who would tear it all down for personal gain. When Samantha took the stage, she revealed the insider documents, the kind of man. Leo was someone who gave everything he had, even in his final days. The crowd murmured in agreement, and a wave of warmth washed over Robert as she looked down at James. "I promised to take care of him." He continued, his voice firm, to honor Leo's memory by giving James the life he deserves. The sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Robert felt a profound sense of closure, also deepened his connection to James for the first time. James seemed truly at ease, resting his head on Robert's lap as they watched the crowd disperse that night back at home. Robert tucked Leo's letter into a frame and placed it on the mantel above the fireplace. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a symbol of the bond between a man and his kin, the legacy of love they had left behind with the memorial service behind them. Robert felt a renewed sense of responsibility for James. The little cat had become an integral part of his life, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Yet as comforting as James's presence was, there was a lingering question. Robert couldn't. Why had Leo left James at the hospital rather than arranging for someone to take care of him directly? Lingered in the back of Robert's mind, growing more insistent as she pieced together Leo's story. One evening, as Robert sat on the couch with James curled up beside him, he decided to dig deeper. Leo's neighbor had mentioned a sister when Leo had been estranged from for years. If anyone had more insight into Leo's final days, it would be her. The next day, Robert tracked down Leo's sister Clara. Using the hospital records and information provided by the neighbor, he found her living in a modest home on the outskirts of the city. With James by his side, Robert approached the front door and knocked. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a woman in her late 50s with tired eyes and a wary expression. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. "Ms. Clara, my name is Robert. I'm a doctor at the hospital where your brother Leo passed away." Robert hesitated, unsure of how to broach the subject. "I've been taking care of his cat, James, and I wanted to learn more about Leo's final days." Clara's eyes softened at the mention of James. "James," she whispered, her voice tinged with emotion. "I haven't seen that little cat since Leo fell. Please come in inside." Clara explained the fractured relationship she'd had with her brother. They had grown apart over the years due to a misunderstanding about their parents' inheritance. Leo had always been stubborn, and Clara admitted that her pride had kept her from reaching out to mend things. "When I heard he was sick, I thought about visiting," she said, her voice trembling, "but I didn't know how we'd react. I didn't want to make things worse." Robert listened carefully, noting their regret in Clara's voice. "He spoke about you. In his letter, he offered gently. Ted was clear he cared about you even if things were complicated." Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to pat James's head. "It should have been there for him," she murmured, "and for James. Leo loved this little cat more than anything." Their conversation took an unexpected turn when Clara revealed something Robert hadn't known. Leo had been trying to reconcile with her in his final month. She had left messages, sent letters, and even attempted to visit her home, but I was too afraid to answer. Clara admitted it thought it was too late. Hearing this, Robert felt a surge of determination. "It's not too late to honor his memory," he said. "You can help me take care of James and ensure Leo's story isn't forgotten." Clara nodded, her resolve strengthening. "I want to make things right for Leo and for James." As Clara and Robert began to collaborate, new challenges emerged. Clara suggested visiting Leo's old home to retrieve any items she might have left behind. For James, the house had been locked since Leo's hospitalization, and the thought of going through his belongings was daunting for both of them. Still, they agreed it was necessary. The visit to Leo's home was an emotional loan. The small, cluttered house was filled with memories of a man who had lived simply but deeply. James immediately recognized the space, wagging his tail excitedly as she sniffed around in the living room. They found a worn-out blanket that James seemed particularly drawn to. Clara folded it carefully, her hands trembling, in a drawer near the kitchen. Robert discovered a box filled with photographs and letters. Among them was a journal Leo had kept during his illness. Flipping through its pages, Robert was struck by the depth of Leo's love for James. "This cat saved me." One entry read, "It gave me reason to keep going even when everything felt hopeless." The journal also revealed something unexpected. Leo had been planning to set up a fund for animal shelters in his community, a way to give back to the creatures that had brought them so much comfort. However, his illness had progressed too quickly for him to finalize the details. Robert shared this discovery with Clara, who immediately latched onto the idea. "We have to make this happen," she said firmly. "It's what Leo would have wanted." But turning Leo's dream into a reality wasn't going to be easy. Robert and Clara began reaching out to local shelters and organizations, pitching the idea of a memorial fund in Leo's name. They encountered resistance at first. Some shelters were skeptical, others lacked the resources to participate. But Robert's passion for the project eventually won people over. James became the face of their campaign, his loyalty and resilience inspiring everyone who heard his story. A photo of James sitting beside Leo's framed letter became the centerpiece of their promotional materials, and donations began to pour in from neighbors, hospital staff, and even strangers who had heard about Leo's story. As the fund grew, Robert noticed a change in Clara. The guilt and sadness that had once consumed her began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose. She started volunteering at a local shelters, spending time with cats who reminded her of James. Robert too felt a renewed sense of fulfillment balancing his work at the hospital with his efforts for the fund. Wasn't easy, but every time he saw James wagging his tail or received a thank you note from a shelter, he knew it was worth it. The memorial fund for Leo's legacy gained momentum. Robert and Clara found themselves working more closely together, their shared mission to honor Leo brought them a sense of healing, but it also exposed deep-seated emotions and unresolved regrets that neither had anticipated. One afternoon, Robert invited Clara to visit the hospital where Leo had spent his final day. She believed it would help her connect with the brother she had lost and give her closure. Clara hesitated at first, visibly uneasy. "I don't know if I can face it," she admitted, her voice trembling. "You don't have to do this alone." Robert reassured her, "James and I will be right there with you." Clara looked at James, who wagged his tail enthusiastically as encouraging her to take the steps. She nodded, her resolve firming. "Okay, let's do it at the hospital." Robert led Clara to the ward where Leo had been treated. The sterile halls and faint smell of antiseptic brought back flood of memories for Robert, but he focused on Clara, whose eyes darted around nervously. They stopped outside the room where Leo had stayed. "This is it," Robert said softly, gesturing to the door. Clara hesitated, her hand hovering over the handle. "What if I can't do this?" she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Robert placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Take your time, Leo would understand." With a deep breath, Clara pushed the door open. The room was empty, but it still bore traces of Leo's presence. A framed picture of James left by the bedside, a stack of books she had been reading, and the faint of lavender from the air freshener he'd favored. Clara stepped inside, her composure crumbling. She saw the photo of James he early loved. "You didn't," she said, kneeling down to stroke the cat's head. James wagged his tail and licked her hand as if offering comfort. Robert watched silently, giving Clara space to process her emotions. After a few moments, she stood and turned to him. "Thank you for
bringing me here," she said. "I needed this." As they left the hospital, Clara opened up about her feelings of guilt. "I wasted so much time being angry with Leo," she confessed, "and for what a few dollars from our parents' estate it seemed so trivial." Now Robert nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Regret can be heavy," he said, "but it's what we do with it that matters. You're honoring Leo's memory now, and that's what counts." Clara smiled faintly. "I just hope it's enough." Meanwhile, the memorial fund was beginning to attract attention beyond their community. A local news outlet reached out to Robert and Clara asking to feature James's story as part of a 30:06 segment on the healing power of animals. Robert was hesitant at first, worried about exposing James to too much attention, but Clara saw it as an opportunity to expand Leo's legacy this could bring. In so much support for the shelter, she argued it's what Leo would have wanted. Robert agreed reluctantly, and the interview was scheduled on the day of the shoot. James was a natural, charming the reporters with his friendly demeanor and heartwarming story. The segment aired later that week, and the response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, and people from across the state reached out to express their admiration for Leo's dedication to animals. Despite the success of the campaign, Robert found himself grappling with his own emotions. Caring for James and working on the fund had filled a void in his life, but it also forced him to confront the loneliness he had buried beneath his work. He began to wonder if his connection with James was more about filling his own emotional gaps than truly honoring Leo's wishes. One evening, as Robert sat on the couch with James, Clara stopped by unexpectedly. She carried a box of Leo's belongings, which she had been sorting through. "I thought you might want this," she said, handing it to Robert. Inside the box were Leo's handwritten letters, photos, and a collection of cat training guides. Robert pulled out one of the letters, addressed to whomever takes care of James. As he read Leo's heartfelt words of gratitude for whoever would love and protect James, Robert felt a lump in his throat. "He trusted you," Clara said softly, "and I can see why." Robert looked at Clara, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been struggling," he admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing this for James or for myself." Clara placed a hand on his arm. "It's okay to feel that way, we're human, but what you're doing for James and for Leo goes beyond that. You've given James a home, and you've given Leo's story a voice. That's not selfish, that's love." Her words resonated deeply with Robert. For the first time, he allowed himself to fully embrace the bond he had formed with James, not as a replacement for the relationships he lacked, but as a testament to the love and loyalty Leo had instilled in the little cat. The success of the memorial fund had brought renewed purpose to both Robert and Clara, but it also attracted unforeseen challenges. With James's story gaining widespread attention, the shelter received an influx of adoption applications, donations, and even offers to feature James in national campaigns. What seemed like an opportunity soon became a logistical and emotional strain. One day, as Robert reviewed emails at the shelter, an unexpected visitor arrived. A man in his late 40s, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, introduced himself as Gerald Parmarker, a representative from a high-profile marketing agency. His proposal was bold. James would become the face of a nationwide campaign for pet adoption awareness, complete with commercials, public appearances, and merchandise. Robert hesitated. James is more than just a story. He's family. I don't want to exploit him. Gerald leaned in, his tone persuasive. This isn't about exploitation. It's about amplifying his impact. Think of how many lives James could change, both animals and humans. It's what Leo would have wanted. Clara, who had joined the meeting, was torn. The campaign could bring unprecedented attention to their cause, but it also risked overexposing James and detracting from Leo's personal story. We need time to think about this, she said firmly. That evening, Robert and Clara debated the proposal. Clara leaned toward accepting, emphasizing the potential benefits. This could fund the shelter for years. We could save so many animals, but Robert was reluctant. James has been through enough. I don't want to turn him into a commodity. Their argument grew heated, unearthing deeper tensions. Clara accused Robert of holding back out of fear, while Robert questioned whether Clara truly understood the emotional weight of their journey with James. As their voices rose, James, sensing the tension, whimpered softly and nudged Robert's leg. The gesture broke the intensity of the moment, and both Robert and Clara fell silent, guilt washing over them. Maybe we're too close to this, Clara admitted quietly. We need to make a decision that's best for James, not for us. The next day, as Robert pondered the campaign offer, a stranger approached him at the shelter, a young woman named Elena. She introduced herself as a veterinary technician who had known Leo through his volunteer work. Elena revealed a surprising detail. Leo had once considered starting a mobile veterinary clinic for underserved areas, inspired by James's ability to bring comfort to those in need. Robert was taken aback. He 35:6. Never mentioned this to me. Elena smiled. It was just an idea he was exploring, but he talked about it with such passion. He wanted to help people and their pets no matter where they were. The revelation stirred something in Robert. It added a new layer to Leo's legacy, one that went beyond James's story. Robert shared this with Clara, and together they wondered if this could be a better way to honor Leo's vision. As they began researching the feasibility of a mobile clinic, strange developments began to unfold. Robert noticed unfamiliar faces lingering near the shelter, and one evening he found a note slipped under the door. It read, "James doesn't belong to you." Alarmed, Robert showed the note to Clara. "What do you think this means?" he asked, his voice edged with worry. Clara's expression darkened. "Do you think someone's claiming to have a connection to James? Maybe they think he's valuable because of the publicity." Robert couldn't shake the unease that settled over him. They decided to install security cameras around the shelter and notify local authorities, but the incident weighed heavily on both of them. Days later, Gerald Parker called, pressing for an answer on the campaign. Robert and Clara agreed to meet with him one last time to clarify their concerns. A meeting quickly took a surprise turn when Gerald revealed that another organization had reached out claiming to be James's original owner. They're threatening legal action if James isn't returned. Gerald said this could complicate everything. Robert's heart sank. James had been Leo's loyal companion for years. There was no doubt about his rightful place, but the idea of someone else trying to take him away was terrifying. "Do they have proof?" Clara asked, her voice tight. Gerald shook his head. "Not yet, but with all the attention James has received, it's not uncommon for people to fabricate claims. You need to be prepared." That evening, Robert sat alone with James, stroking his fur as the cat lay curled at his feet. "What are we going to do, buddy?" he murmured. James looked up at him with trusting eyes, and Robert felt a surge of determination. He decided to dig deeper into Leo's records, hoping to find something that would irrefutably prove James's history. Late into the night, Robert searched through Leo's old documents, eventually uncovering a worn envelope containing adoption papers for James. The papers detailed Leo's adoption of James from a rescue organization years ago, complete with photos and signatures. Relief washed over Robert, but it was short-lived. He realized that if this fabricated claim gained traction, it could still harm their mission and overshadow Leo's legacy. The tension reached a breaking point when Clara received a call from Gerald. The campaign was moving forward with or without their involvement, using another cat as the face of the project. "This doesn't feel right," Clara said after relaying the news to Robert. "They're exploiting the story without understanding what it means." Robert nodded. "Then we'll do it our way. Leo's dream of a mobile clinic, let's make it happen." As they doubled down on their plans for the clinic, Robert and Clara faced the mounting pressures of the fabricated claim, the campaign controversy, and their personal struggles. But through it all, James remained there in his unwavering loyalty, reminding them of the love and resilience Leo had cherished. Robert and Clara's decision to pursue Leo's dream of a mobile veterinary clinic reignited their passion for their mission, but the challenges ahead loomed larger than ever. Despite uncovering James's adoption papers, the fabricated claim against against James's ownership gained attention online, spurred by the widespread publicity of his story. Anonymous commentators questioned their integrity, and some even accused him of exploiting James for financial gain. To combat the negativity, Robert and Clara decided to share Leo's story in its entirety, his love for animals, his vision for underserved communities, and how James had been a symbol of hope for him during his darkest times. They planned a heartfelt event at the shelter, inviting local supporters, former colleagues of Leo, and even the media. It was a chance to reclaim the narrative. On the day of the event, the shelter buzzed with ACACITY. Volunteers arranged photographs of Leo and James, showcasing their shared journey, while Clara finalized the presentation. James seemed to sense the importance of the occasion, staying close to Robert and greeting every visitor with his gentle presence. As the guests gathered, Robert stood in front of the screen, displaying a slideshow of Leo's life. Taking a deep breath, he began. Leo wasn't just a cat lover, he was a dreamer. He believed in creating a world where every animal had a chance to heal and every person could find solace. 40:00. In their companionship, James was a cornerstone of that dream. The audience listened intently as Robert recounted Leo's aspirations for the mobile clinic and how James had inspired him. Clara added, "This isn't just about one cat, it's about the connection we share with animals and the transformative power they bring to our lives." Leo wanted that connection to reach everyone, especially those who needed it most. By the end of the event, the room was filled with applause and renewed support. Donations poured in and local businesses pledged resources for the mobile clinic. It was a turning point, but not everyone in the crowd was there to cheer. As the event wrapped up, a woman approached Robert and Clara with a guarded expression, introducing herself as Samantha. She claimed to be part of the family who had originally fostered James before Leo adopted him. Her presence was unexpected, and her words carried an edge of resentment. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Samantha began, "but I need you to understand that James wasn't always yours. My parents cared for him first. They loved him, and when circumstances forced us to give him up, it broke our hearts." Robert studied her carefully. There was no malice in her tone, but her words added a layer of complexity to the story. "I'm sorry for what you went through," he said sincerely, "but Leo adopted James legally, and they shared a bond that was unbreakable." Samantha nodded, her eyes softening. "I've seen how much James means to you. I just wanted you to know where he came from. He brought joy to my family before he brought it to yours." Clara stepped forward, extending her hand. "Thank you for sharing that with us. It's clear James has touched many lives. We'd love to hear more about his time with your family, if you're willing." Samantha hesitated, but eventually agreed to meet again. It was a delicate connection that hinted at new perspectives on James's story. Meanwhile, the controversy surrounding Gerald Parker's campaign escalated. The alternative cat chosen for project bore an uncanny resemblance to James, and the marketing materials heavily implied a connection to Leo's story. Outraged, Tomas confronted Gerald. In a tense phone, Kalu misleading people. Robert said, his voice firm, "This isn't about awareness anymore, it's about profit." Gerald's response was dismissive. "The public loves a good story. If you're not willing to play ball, don't blame me for finding someone who will." The call left Robert fuming, but it also strengthened his resolve. He and Clara focused their energy on the mobile clinic, determined to build something authentic that honored Leo's legacy. In the weeks that followed, Samantha became a surprising ally. She shared old photos of James as a kitten along with anecdotes about his early life. These stories painted a fuller picture of James's journey, one that bridged two families united by their love for him. Samantha's involvement also brought unexpected insights into Leo's character. He visited us after the adoption. She revealed one evening he wanted to make sure we were okay with the transition. He even sent updates about James. For years, Leo had a way of making people feel seen. Robert and Clara were moved by this revelation. It deepened their understanding of Leo's kindness and inspired them to incorporate a similar ethos into the mobile clinic, offering not just care for animals, but emotional support for the people connected to them. As the mobile clinic plans partnerships emerged, a local veterinary college offered to provide interns, while a logistics company donated a van for the clinic's use. The community's involvement became a testament to Leo's enduring influence. However, the fabricated ownership claim resurfaced in the form of legal threats. An anonymous party filed a petition alleging that James's adoption had procedural irregularities. Though Robert and Clara knew the claim was baseless, the legal process threatened to stall their progress. Faced with this new challenge, Robert reached out to Samantha for advice. Her connections within the local animal welfare community proved invaluable. "Let me help," she offered. "James deserves to stay where he belongs." Her involvement marked a shift in their relationship, transforming an initial tension into a partnership rooted in mutual respect for James's legacy that challenges alliances and emotional bonds. Formed during this period set the stage for a critical turning point to fabricated claims in Gerald's exploitive campaign were no longer just obstacles, they became catalysts for Robert and Clara to solidify their vision for the mobile clinic and defend Leo's dream with renewed vigor. The fabricated legal claims surrounding James's adoption intensified, pulling Robert and Clara into a whirlwind of paperwork, court filings, and public scrutiny. Gerald Parker seized the opportunity, further exploiting the controversy to amplify his campaign. His advertisements blatantly hinted that James's current home might not be legitimate, stoking doubts among the community. What if we lose James? Clara voiced her fear one late evening as they sat in the shelter's office, the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating stacks of documents. James lay at their feet, his head resting on Robert's shoe, seemingly unaware of the turmoil surrounding him. Robert reached down, scratching behind James's ears. "We won't let that happen," he said with quiet determination. Leo trusted us and will fight for him just like he'd fight for us. The legal battle began to weigh on them. Court hearings loomed, and every moment spent away from James felt like a betrayal. Samantha, who had become a staunch ally, offered to testify on their behalf, providing evidence of Leo's proper adoption process and James's well-being under their care. The night before their first hearing, an unexpected visitor arrived at the shelter. Air courier delivered an envelope marked confidential. Inside was a letter from someone claiming to have insider knowledge of Gerald Parker's operation. It detailed how Gerald's team had fabricated the ownership claims and manufactured false documentation to sabotage Robert and Clara's efforts. This could change everything. Clara said, her hands trembling as she read the letter aloud. But how do we know it's real? Robert examined the documents enclosed. They included emails, internal memos, and receipts tied to Gerald's team. "We'll have to validate these," he said cautiously, "but if this checks out, it's the proof we need to expose him." The following morning, Robert and Clara presented the evidence to their lawyer, who immediately recognized its significance. "This isn't just about clearing James's name," she said. "If these documents are real, Gerald could face serious consequences in court." Robert and Clara stood firm, supported by Samantha and other community members who had rallied to their cause. The opposing side attempted to cast doubt on their claims, but their lawyer methodically dismantled the fabricated allegations, presenting the damning evidence against Gerald's team. Gerald's lawyer grew visibly uneasy as the judge scrutinized the documents. When questioned about the authenticity of the claims, Gerald deflected, insisting he had acted in the best interest of animal welfare. However, the judge's skepticism was evident. The tension in the courtroom reached a boiling point when Samantha took the stand. Her heartfelt testimony painted a vivid picture of James's journey from his time with her family to Leo's unwavering love and care, and finally to the shelter that had become his home. Her words moved the audience, even drawing tears from some. "James isn't just a cat," she concluded. "He's a symbol of hope and resilience, and he belongs with the people who honor Leo's legacy." The judge's decision was swift. The fabricated claims were dismissed, and Gerald's campaign was publicly discredited. Outside the courthouse, Robert, Clara, and Samantha embraced as reporters swarmed them with questions. "James is staying where he belongs," Robert declared, his voice steady despite the emotional toll of the battle. "And Leo's dream lives on." While the legal victory was a relief, it didn't mark the end of their struggles. Gerald's fallout left a trail of mistrust in the community, and many questioned how such deception could occur. Determined to restore faith in their mission, Robert and Clara decided to host a large-scale event to officially launch the mobile clinic. It would be a chance to reaffirm their commitment to Leo's vision and celebrate the community's role in making a reality. In the days leading up to the event, tensions simmered as remnants of Gerald's influence lingered. Anonymous threats and attempts to discredit their work continued, but Robert and Clara refused to be deterred. Instead, they channeled their energy into preparing for the launch, enlisting volunteers, and spreading the word about the clinic's mission. On the morning of the event, James seemed to embody the spirit of resilience that had defined their journey. His presence drew children and adults alike, his wagging tail and gentle demeanor bringing smiles to everyone he encountered. Robert couldn't help but think of Leo and how proud he would be to see this moment. The event drew an even larger crowd than expected. Local news outlets covered the story, and the shelter's social media pages were flooded with messages of support. Robert and Clara stood side by side as they unveiled the clinic, a sleek, customized vehicle adorned with Leo's favorite quote, "Every animal deserves a second chance, and every person deserves the joy they bring." As the crowd erupted in applause that felt a wave of emotion. This wasn't just a culmination of their efforts. It was a testament to the power of community perseverance and the bond between humans and animals. Yet amidst the celebration, a lingering question remained: how would Gerald respond to his public disgrace? Robert and Clara knew they couldn't let their guard down, especially with the clinic's future at stake. The celebration of the mobile clinic's launch was a resounding success, but Robert and Clara remained vigilant. The shadow of Gerald Parker's schemes loomed large, and they anticipated retaliation. True to their fears, Gerald wasn't about to fade quietly into obscurity. In the days following his courtroom disgrace, he launched a smear campaign leveraging his remaining influence to see how doubt about the shelter and the mobile clinic online. Anonymous accounts began posting accusations claiming the shelter mishandled funds, fabricated James's adoption story, and exploited the community for personal gain. Gerald's allies placed inflammatory ads in local newspapers, reigniting skepticism among those who hadn't fully embraced Robert and Clara's vision. His network is deeper than we thought, Clara said one evening, scrolling through the avalanche of false accusations. If we let this fester, it could undo everything we've worked for. Robert nodded grimly. We can't fight him in the shadows. We need to bring everything to light and force him into the open. Robert and Clara decided to organize a town hall meeting, inviting members of the community to hear the full story of James, the mobile clinic, and Leo's legacy. They also planned to present irrefutable evidence of Gerald's manipulations, turning the tide of public opinion. And for all, Samantha volunteered to help, using her connections in the community to spread the word. If we show them who Gerald really is, they'll see the truth, she said, her voice resolute. On the night of the town hall, the venue was packed with concerned citizens, reporters, and local leaders. Gerald Parker himself arrived, flanked by a few remaining loyalists. His smug demeanor made it clear he didn't expect to lose his battle. Robert took the stage, first, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. He began by recounting Leo's dream of the shelter, the sacrifices he made, and the impact it had on countless animals and families. Clara followed, detailing the challenges they faced after Leo's passing, including the smear campaign orchestrated by Gerald. Everything we've built has been for the animals and the community. Clara said, her voice tinged with emotion, but they're exposing Gerald's fabrication. She displayed email exchanges, financial records, and testimonies from whistleblowers who had worked for Gerald. Gasps rippled through the audience as the extent of his deceit came to light. This isn't just about James, Samantha concluded. It's about standing up to corruption and protecting right. Gerald stood abruptly, his face red with anger. This is nothing but a smear job against me, he shouted, his voice echoing through the hall. You can't prove half of this nonsense. Robert calmly stepped forward, holding up the court's dismissal of Gerald's fabricated claims. We already did, he said firmly. The court saw through your lies, and now the community does too. The tension in the room was palpable as Gerald's allies began to murmur among themselves, some quietly slipping out the door. The remaining audience erupted in applause, their support for Robert, Clara, and Samantha evident. Gerald's final attempt to salvage his reputation came in the form of a hastily scheduled press conference the following day. He claimed to be the victim of a conspiracy, accusing Robert and Clara of bribery and collusion. However, his credibility was shattered, and his audience dwindled to a few loyalists. The shelter supporters, on the other hand, rallied like never before. Donations poured and volunteers flocked to help, and the community united around Leo's vision. The mobile clinic, which had been met with skepticism during its launch, now symbolized resilience and hope in the midst of this renewed momentum. Clara received a call from a local news station. They wanted to feature James's story in a primetime segment highlighting the shelter's work and the clinic's potential impact. It was an opportunity to amplify their mission and solidify their place in the community. During the interview, Robert shared his journey with James, his voice brimming with pride and gratitude. James isn't just a cat to us, he said. He represents everything Leo stood for: love, second chances, and the unbreakable bond between people and animals. Clara added, this shelter and the mobile clinic aren't just projects, they're a promise to Leo and to every animal and person who needs a helping hand. As the segment aired, it sparked an outpouring of support, further isolating Gerald and cementing Robert and Clara's position in the community. But their victory wasn't without its cost. The relentless battle had taken an emotional toll, and they knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. One evening, as they sat on 55:13, the shelter's porch, James lying contentedly at their feet, Clara voiced the question question that had been weighing on both their minds. Do you think it's over? She asked softly. Robert stared out at the horizon, the fading light casting a warm glow over the shelter. Gerald's influence is fading, he said, but people like him don't give up easily. We need to stay vigilant. Clara nodded, her hand resting on James's head. At least we have each other. And James, Robert smiled, the weight on his shoulders feeling a little lighter. And Leo's dream, he added, no matter what comes next, we'll keep it alive. Despite Gerald Parker's retreat into obscurity, the fallout from his schemes left lingering challenges for the shelter. Some community members still harbored doubts. Remnants of Gerald's smear campaign, the mobile clinic faced unexpected hurdles, including resistance from local policy makers influenced by remnants of Gerald's network. Robert and Clara knew they had won the battle, but the war for trust and stability wasn't entirely over. In response, they intensified their efforts to demonstrate the clinic's value. Weekly open houses at the shelter showcased their work, and mobile clinic visits to underserved neighborhoods became community events. James, the story's hero, played a pivotal role, his gentle presence drawing people in and breaking down barriers. But the tipping point came unexpectedly in the form of a crisis that tested the shelter and clinic's resilience. One stormy evening, Clara received an urgent call from Samantha. A nearby industrial site had reported a chemical spill and the surrounding area was being evacuated. Reports came in of stray animals trapped in the flood zone, their lives at risk as the toxic water rose. We need to act fast, Samantha said, her voice urgent. The authorities are overwhelmed and they can't focus on the animals. Robert and Clara sprang into action, rallying their team and preparing the mobile clinic for its most critical mission yet. Volunteers loaded crates, supplies, and medical equipment, while Clara coordinated with local authorities to ensure access to the evacuation zone. As they approached the area, the scene was chaotic. Flood water surged through the streets and frightened animals huddled on rooftops and in abandoned buildings. Robert guided the team, his voice calm but firm. We split into groups. Safety first, no risks. We can't handle the rescue mission, was harrowing. Clara wed through waist-deep water to coax a terrified cat out of a submerged yard. Samantha and another volunteer climbed onto a roof to reach a stranded cat. James, sensing the emergency, seemed to become an active participant, barking encouragement to the animals they saved. But the operation wasn't without its dangers. At one point, Robert found himself on unstable ground or rushing water, threatening to sweep him away as he struggled to maintain his footing. James appeared beside him, his steady presence giving Robert the focus he needed to regain balance and save a frightened kitten. By dawn, the team had rescued dozens of animals. Exhausted but exhilarated, they returned to the shelter where the mobile clinic sprang into action. Injured and frightened animals were treated, fed, and comforted. The sight of James gently licking a kitten's wounds became a symbol of hope amid the chaos. News of the rescue spread, rapidly garnering widespread attention. Local reporters flocked to the shelter, capturing images of the rescued animals and the tireless efforts of the team. Robert and Clara were interviewed there, words fading both the urgency of the crisis and the dedication of their mission. This is why we do what we do, Clara told a reporter, her voice thick with emotion. Every life matters and will always be here to protect and care for those who can't protect themselves. The rescue operation not only solidified the shelter's reputation, but also galvanized the community. Donations poured in, volunteers signed up in record numbers, and the mobile clinic schedule was booked for months. Even policymakers who had once opposed their work publicly praised the shelter's efforts amid the triumph. Gerald Parker made one last desperate move. He filed a frivolous lawsuit against the shelter, claiming that the mobile clinic had endangered public safety during the rescue mission. His accusations, however, fell flat. The overwhelming evidence of the clinic's positive impact left him isolated, his reputation irreparably damaged. In a dramatic court hearing, Robert and Clara presented testimony from rescue pet owners, local authorities, and medical professionals who had witnessed the clinic's effectiveness firsthand. Gerald's case was dismissed within hours, and he was ordered to pay the shelter's legal fees. The verdict marked the final nail in the coffin for Gerald's schemes. As he slinked away from the courtroom, the weight of his defeat was palpable. The shelter, meanwhile, emerged stronger than ever. In the weeks that followed, Robert and Clara reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. Sitting on the shelter's porch one evening with James lying contentedly at their feet, they shared a quiet moment of triumph. We've come a long way, Robert said, his voice tinged with wonder. From losing Leo to facing Gerald. And now, it feels like we finally turn a corner. Clara nodded, her gaze soft as she stroked James's fur. It's not just about the shelter or the clinic. She said it's about the connections we've built, the lives we touched. That's Leo's legacy. James raised his head, as if sensing the significance of the moment, his gentle eyes reflecting the love and gratitude that had come to define their journey. The shelter was bustling with activity. One bright afternoon, its courtyard filled with volunteers and community members celebrating the success of the rescue mission. The rescued animals, now healthy and full of life, frolicked around, their joy a testament to the resilience of the shelter's mission. Robert stood at the center, addressing the crowd. Today isn't just a celebration of what we accomplished during the storm. It's a celebration of what we become together, a family, a community, and most importantly, a lifeline for those who need us most. His voice carried a sincerity that resonated deeply with everyone present. Clara, standing beside him, held back tears as the crowd erupted in applause. James, ever the symbol of their triumphs, barked joyfully, prompting laughter as the celebration continued. A familiar figure appeared at the entrance to the courtyard. It was Lisa, the woman whose kitten James had saved during the storm. Clutching a small bouquet of flowers, she hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. The crowd parted and Robert and Clara moved to greet her. I just wanted to thank you, Lisa said, her voice trembling with emotion. If it hadn't been for you and your team, my little Daisy wouldn't be here today. Robert smiled warmly. We were just doing what needed to be done. Lisa knelt to pet James Sims, who wagged his tail enthusiastically. And you, she said, her voice soft as she looked into James's eyes. For you're a hero. The moment was simple but profound, reminder of the lives they had touched and the impact of their work. Later that evening, as the sun set and the crowd began to disperse, Clara pulled Robert aside. There's something I've been meaning to show you, she said, her tone carrying a hint of mystery. She led him to the mobile clinic, now parked at the edge of the courtyard. Inside, the space had been transformed. Photos of rescued animals lined the walls alongside thank you notes from their owners. At the center of it all was a framed picture of Leo, his gentle smile, a reminder of the vision that had started it all. This is our tribute to him, Clara explained, her voice thick with emotion. Everything we built, everything we've overcome, it's all because of his dream. Robert stared at the display, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and sorrow. He'd be proud, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As they stepped out of the clinic, a commotion at the shelter's gate drew their attention. A group of children accompanied by a teacher approached, carrying handmade signs that read thank you and heroes of the storm. The children had been inspired by the shelter's story and wanted to express their gratitude. They presented Robert and Clara with a large banner signed with heartfelt messages of thanks and adorned with drawings of animals. One little boy stepped forward, holding out a drawing of James. He's my favorite hero, the boy said, shyly looking up at Robert. Robert knelt to take the drawing, his eyes glistening. He's my favorite too, he said, patting James's head. As the night fell, the shelter grew quiet. The day's events leaving a lingering sense of fulfillment. Robert and Clara sat on the porch with James between them, their thoughts turning to the future. We've come full circle, Clara said, her voice thoughtful, from nearly losing everything to building something stronger than we ever imagined. Robert nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. And it's just the beginning. There's so much more we can do, so many more lives we can save. James rested his head on Clara's lap, his presence a silent affirmation of their journey. In his eyes, they saw the spirit of resilience and hope that had carried them through every challenge. As they reflected on the day, a message came through on Clara's phone. It was from a national animal welfare organization inviting the shelter to join a collaborative initiative aimed at expanding resources for underserved communities. Clara's eyes widened as she read the details. Robert, she said, no matter how small, creates ripples that reach farther than we can ever imagine. The volunteers listened intently, their eyes shining with newfound determination. The shelter was no longer just a refuge for animals. It had become a movement, a symbol of unwavering hope and second chances. As the days passed, more lives were changed. A once timid rescue cat found a forever home with an elderly woman who had recently lost her husband. A litter of abandoned kittens, now healthy and playful, brought joy to a young girl battling an illness. Every adoption, every act of kindness felt like a piece of Leo's legacy coming to life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Robert and Clara stood outside the shelter, watching the volunteers wrap up for the day. James sat between them, his head resting against Robert's leg. We did it, Clara whispered, a mix of exhaustion and pride in her voice. Robert glanced down at James, ruffling the fur behind his ears. No, he said with a soft smile. He did it. We just followed his lead. James wagged his tail, as if he understood. The air was filled with laughter, the gentle hum of of people making a difference. And as they stood there, bathed in the warm glow of twilight, they knew this was only the beginning. Their story wasn't just about loss or struggle or even survival. It was about love, and love, as James had shown them, had no limits. Newly renovated shelter, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. James lay between them, his head resting on his paws, his eyes reflecting the same quiet contentment they all felt. Clara sighed, stretching her legs out in front of her. "Can you believe how far we've come?" she mused. From a single stray cat waiting outside a hospital to all of this, Robert chuckled, running a hand through his hair. Honestly, no, but I can believe in James. And in Leo. This was their story first. We're just carrying it forward. The shelter hummed with new life. Volunteers bustled about, tending to animals, organizing supplies, and sharing laughter over shared purpose. A group of children arrived, excited to meet James, their young voices full of wonder. Clara grinned, watching the cat perk up at the sight of them. "I think he loved this as much as they do." Robert nodded. "It's funny, isn't it? He started out searching for Leo, lost and alone. Now he's found a home, a family, and somehow he's giving that to so many others." A soft breeze rustled the trees, carried with it the sounds of distant laughter and the gentle barks of happy cats. It was a far cry from the lonely, uncertain night Robert had first followed James through the city streets. Back then, neither of them had known where the journey would lead. Now, they stood at the heart of something bigger than themselves. James's tail thumped against the wooden porch, his gaze shifting between Robert and Clara, as if he too understood the weight of the moment. "We're not done yet," Clara said, nudging Robert with her shoulder. He smiled, looking out over the place they had built together. "No, we're just getting started." And as the stars began to the night sky, they sat in silence, knowing that the best chapters of their story were still ahead. Beacon of hope for all who enter. Robert ran his fingers over the engraved letters, a lump forming in his throat. Leo's Haven, a place where no animal would be forgotten, a place where love and loyalty, the very things Leo and James had shared, would continue to thrive. The small crowd that had gathered for the ceremony broke into applause as Clara spoke, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Leo Langley may no longer be with us, but his kindness, his love, and his unwavering loyalty live on. This shelter isn't just a building, it's a promise that no animal will ever be alone, a promise that every act of compassion, no matter how small, will create ripples far beyond what we can see." James, now wearing a new collar with a small silver tag that read "Forever Home," barked once, as if in agreement. Robert stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the faces of volunteers, donors, and the many people whose lives have been touched by one man and his cat. "This isn't the end of our journey," he said. "It's just the beginning." The ceremony ended, but the energy remained. People lingered, sharing stories, signing up to volunteer, and playing with the animals. Children gathered around James, giggling as he happily wagged his tail, basking in the attention. As the sun set, bathing Leo's Haven in golden light, Robert and Clara stood side by side, watching his life unfolded before them. "We did it," Clara murmured. Robert smiled, watching James as he trotted through the shelter grounds, greeting new arrivals with the same warmth Leo had once shown him. "No," he corrected gently. Leo did, and as the first stars blinked to life above them, Robert swore he could feel Leo's presence in the night breeze, a quiet whisper of gratitude, of peace, and of love that would never truly fade. Beneath the name Shelter Hope, the inscription stood as a quiet reminder, in memory of Leo, whose dream lives on in every life we touch. The applause swelled, not just for the shelter, but for the spirit that had built it, the unwavering love, resilience, and unity that had carried them all to this moment. As Robert stood before the crowd, he felt the weight of everything they had fought for. This place wasn't just walls and doors. It was a promise, a second chance for the lost and the forgotten. "This isn't just a shelter," he said, his voice strong yet filled with emotion. "It's a testament to the power of love, resilience, and community. Every life saved here, every paw that finds a home, is a reminder of what we can achieve when we stand together." Clara took his hand, her eyes shining, and we're just getting started. Leo's Haven became more than a sanctuary. It became a movement. Stories of its mission spread far and wide, inspiring others to open their hearts, their homes, and their hands to those in need. Schools brought students to visit, learning the power of kindness through James, the shelter's beloved ambassador. Families who once came searching for a pet left with something far greater, a renewed belief in love, in hope, in second chances. Through it all, James remained at Robert's side, a living, breathing symbol of everything they stood for. His loyalty never wavered, but it expanded, embracing not just Leo's memory, but the countless lives they would go on to save. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the shelter, Robert, Clara, and James stood at the entrance, watching as another family walked out the doors, this time with a cat who had finally found a home. Robert exhaled, feeling the quiet presence of Leo in the wind, in the laughter of the children playing, in the hopeful barks of the cats who had been given a new beginning. They had honored his memory, and they would continue to do so. Turning to the camera, Clara smiled. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of love and second chances, help us continue this mission. Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories of courage, resilience, and hope. And don't miss our next story, another incredible journey that will touch your heart. James barked softly, as if adding his own invitation. A new chapter was just beginning.